We are live.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another joint hearing of the Senate Public Safety, Transportation and Environment Subcommittee of the Budget and Taxation Committee and the Transportation and Environment Subcommittee of the House Appropriations Committee. We have one budget analysis today from the State Highway Administration. Before we get started, ask folks to mute, and then also note we're joined by the Full Appropriations Committee Vice Chair, Vice Chair Chang. And I don't know, Mr. Vice Chair, do you have anything you want to say at the top here? Nope.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Great. And Chair McCray, anything from the Senate side?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to say that we're joined by Senator George Edwards from the 1st. We're joined by Senator Sailing from the 6th, and we have just been joined by Senator Doug Peters, and you have full attendance, Mr. Chair.
Great. Do you know my district number, Mr. Chairman?
17?
Oh, so close. 16.
16.
Grew up in 17. All right. Well, let's start with our analysis with our DLS analyst, Steve McCulloch. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committees. Steve McCulloch, Department of Legislative Services, here today to present the State Highway Administration Fiscal 2022 budget. As you can see from the opening exhibit, the budget for SHA does increase by $12.8 million or 4.4% over the current year. However, as we will discuss in just a minute, that is based off of a lower 2021 due to cost containment.
Yes, Sam just sent us the link.
Okay.
Yeah, that one's better.
I'm getting a lot of feedback. Does everybody?
Can folks mute who aren't, Steve, please?
In looking at the capital budget, the fiscal 22 budget for SHA decreases by $239 million compared to the current year. This is very much in line with the, most of the rest of the department in this reduced revenue due to COVID. Turning now to look at the managing for results indicators. Exhibit 1 shows the traffic fatalities and the fatality rates from 2010 through 2019. This is on a calendar year basis. The black line is the goal for the maximum fatality rate. The red line is the number of fatalities per 100 million miles traveled. And as you can see, both the absolute number represented by the blue bar and the rate increased in 2019. And anecdotal evidence and stories has just suggested that in 2020, fatalities also were up. A lot of that attributed to increased speeds on the road as less traffic allowed people to speed up. Looking at the next measure is a look at the percent of vehicle miles traveled in congested conditions during the evening peak hours. And as you can see from this graph, the last 2 years showing 20 and 21 estimated, traffic is down, which is not surprising given the reduced vehicle miles traveled due to the pandemic and increased use of telework and shutdowns, things like that. The next MFR exhibit looks at the percent of bridges on the state highway network that are rated as poor. In previous years, this was titled structurally deficient bridges. The highway community is trying to move away from that term, but the state Federal Highway Administration now terms a bridge to be in poor condition if any of its components, and those are listed at the top here, either the deck, the superstructure, substructure, or culvert. If any of those have a poor rating or worse, then it would fall into what was previously that structurally deficient condition. That is always important to note that none of these terms means that a bridge is unsafe. When a bridge is unsafe, it is taken offline and closed until that is corrected. It simply means that there are parts of the bridge that need to be addressed to bring them back to a state of good repair. Looking at the final MFR measure, looks at the percent of highway network in an overall preferred maintenance condition. And the department has done fairly well since 2017 in meeting the goal, which is represented by the black bar. And in 2020, the department did note that it was able to extend the hours, the work hours on some of the highways due to the reduced traffic due to COVID-19. Turning now to talk about the 2021 budget, there is deficiencies totaling $24 million reduction in the 2021 budget for SHA. This is to reflect the revenue declines and to implement cost containments to address those revenue declines. Looking at state agency spending, this pie chart shows that State Highway Administration relies slightly more heavily on its own personnel, 45% in fiscal 2022, than in contractual services, which represents 36% of the spending in 2022. So slightly heavier on its own personnel to carry out the operating functions of the office. Looking at the proposed budget, as I mentioned at the top, the 2022 budget actually increases by 12.8 million, but again, that's off of a reduction, $24 million decrease in 21. So overall, if you looked at the 2 years, spending would actually be down from where it was. Personnel expenses increased by about $3.5 million. That's this top part of the table. On the bottom part of the table, you see the big bounce back from the deficiency appropriation that reduced money in 2021. And so in 2022, that bounces back. And then the reason the whole budget is not more than $23 million increase in 22, as we get down to the bottom of the table, you see the reductions that were made as part of ongoing cost containment, things like the building and road repair item and supplies and materials, again, related to road repair. Turning now to the personnel data, there is one fewer position in the allowance than in the current year, and that represents a transfer of the unit manager position for the department's climate change program from SHA into the Office of the Secretary mode. Exhibit 7 shows the highway user revenues. We're now switching into the discussion of the capital budget for state highways. And as you will recall, highway user revenues became a mandated capital grant with fiscal 2020 and going forward. So this shows the allowance of $254 million for these mandated capital grants, which represents a $17.4 million increase. But as we'll see in a minute, again, that is based off of a lowered 2021 allocation. Exhibit 8 shows the county and municipal share of the fiscal 2022 budget. So you have that to refer back to. Looking at the 6-year capital program, Exhibit 9 compares the last year's plan, which encompassed 2020 through 2025, with the current CTP, which goes from 2021 to 2026. And between those two plans, on the state program, there's a reduction over that 6-year plan of nearly $800 million. Next line shows the mandated capital grants for state aid, the highway user revenues, and this shows that, again, comparing 6-year program to 6-year program, there's $124 million less in the current 6-year program than there were in the prior one. There are 2 years of this 2021 through 2026 period where the share of the highway user formula goes back to the 9.6% from the enhanced current percent of 13.5 that locals are currently getting. This is shown again more probably easily to understand in terms of the cash flow changes. The top part of Exhibit 10 shows the changes between where the budget was as approved last year by the General Assembly and the current working appropriation. And as you can see that the state program declines by just over $200 million for that period. The highway user grants, the capital grants, decreased by $27.5 million between those 2 years. And again, this change is simply a reflection that revenues were written down due to the pandemic. So there were no change in the underlying formula or the percentages. This is simply due to decreased revenue. Then going down to the bottom part of the table, we look at the change between the 21 working appropriation and the allowance. And there is, in the state side of the program, there's another $256 million decrease from the current year working appropriation. As mentioned just a moment ago, the highway user grants do increase by the 17.3. But my point earlier is if you take the 17 increase and net it with the 27 decrease, since 2021, that would actually be a $10 million decrease over the 2 years. Exhibit 11 is a long exhibit that I will not scroll through, but it shows the major project category for fiscal 2022. Exhibit 11 shows any project that has at least $1 million in fiscal 2022 or has 6-year spending of $5 million or more. So those just kind of show the major projects by county, and it goes on for pages. So you have that to refer back to if you're interested in seeing some of the projects in your county. Exhibit 12 shows the significant changes that were made coming from the last CTP into the current one. There was one project for SHA added to the construction program. That's a US 1 Bel Air Road bridge replacement, $15.5 million funding. But the second kind of movement reflects 2 projects that were being moved from the construction program back to the development and evaluation program due to reduced revenues available from the COVID. And those are these 2 projects listed there. So in the future, when the revenues rebound or these just get pushed out, they would be moved back into the construction program when funding is available. Turning now to the issues, there's one issue, and it's been a perennial issue for several years. It deals with local audits. Each of the municipalities in the state are required to provide audits for an annual basis, a fiscal year, and some uniform financial reporting. The town of Deer Park has not submitted an audit for fiscal 2018, 19, or 20. Since last year, they have issued and submitted the 2017, which was outstanding last year, but again, are still 3 years deficient. And we just note that the law does require municipalities to provide these audits. Legislative Services utilizes the data in the audits and these reports to analyze the financial aid and financial sufficiency for the local departments or local agencies. So that's why we think it's important that these audits do be submitted in a timely manner. That takes us to the recommended actions. On the operating side, the recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance. On the PAYGO side, because the capital highway user grants are now capital appropriations, the recommendation is to withhold the $27 million for, excuse me, it's not even 27 million, $27,000 for Deer Park until it submits the delinquent audits for 2018 through 2020. And that concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Steve. Questions for the analyst, Delegate Kittleman.
I think you're muted, Delegate Kittleman.
You're muted.
Sorry. How many bridges do we have in Maryland that the 2% of still need some work?
I believe it's around 2,000.
Okay.
I'd have to check the.
Yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah, but I mean, it's significant, but.
And the other question I had was, there's when you talk about the capital mandates, somewhere in the last week or two, I was given to understand that we cannot mandate anything in the capital program like we can in the operating. Can you clarify that for
Yeah,
me?
no, there, that is incorrect that you cannot mandate. It's the capital program through, at least for transportation. Transportation capital is all PAYGO. It's in the operating budget.
Okay, well that makes sense.
Now, in terms of maybe on the GO side, it might have been said that you don't need to mandate because on the GO side, the General Assembly can subtract money from one place and add it to another because that is a regular bill that goes to the governor for signature. But on the operating PAYGO side, it acts like any other mandate. You pass legislation to require a certain level of spending.
And the last one is on page 27, where the justification is reduction of unemployment insurance statewide. Does that mean we're spending less on unemployment insurance?
So no, this, you're referring to the
Budget amendment.
appendix for the budget amendment. The Board of Public Works on July 1st of 2020, as part of the state's cost containment, made reduction to the state's unemployment insurance fund. It's not what goes out to help the citizens of Maryland. This is the fund that agencies pay into for the state's share of the unemployment. There was a surplus in that fund, so that action was taken as a cost containment. But obviously, the state in this budget, in the personnel section, you would see funds going back into that state fund of unemployment insurance.
Thank you.
Great. Any further questions for the analyst? Okay, we'll turn to the department and agency. We're joined today by Secretary Slater from the Maryland Department of Transportation and the State Highway Administrator, Tim Smith. We know it's a busy time for you guys, given the weather outside. So thanks for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having us. Good afternoon, Chairman McCray, Chairman Corman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Greg Slater, Secretary, Maryland Department of Transportation. It is a pleasure to be before you today with the department. First thing I'd like to do is thank Mr. McCullough for always his thorough analysis. He always does a good job and always raises good questions with us. It is a great pride that I share with you the achievements of the State Highway team. This year has been challenging for the agency as we continue to deliver for our customers in our pandemic. The 3,000 team members and contractors really never stopped working and adapted to health guidelines and kept the state moving. Many projects were completed early. They did what they needed to be done to keep the supply chain moving and deliver what people count on us for. They completed a lot of projects over the course of the last year, with about 144 projects for $427 million. And they have 342 active construction projects. They continued to focus on these context-driven solutions to create safe and accessible and a balanced transportation system for everyone, and really focus on the safety of all of our customers, our motorists, our bicyclists, our pedestrians, and keep them all in our priority. Before I turn it over to SHA Administrator Smith, I do want to take a moment and just thank them and the entire team publicly for the amazing work that they've done over the last couple of weeks with some pretty unpredictable weather. And they've really worked around the clock. And I know firsthand that a lot of them are pretty tired and pretty worn down, and they've worked pretty hard. So I just want to thank them publicly. So now I'll turn it over to Administrator Tim Smith and provide a little bit of a closer look on the SHA program, and we're both happy to answer any questions you may have.
So thank you, Secretary Slater. Good afternoon, Chairman McCray and Chairman Corman. As was mentioned, my name is Tim Smith, Administrator of State Highway. Connecting people to life's opportunities continues to be kind of the core mission for MDOT. At State Highway, we just happen to do it with our roadway system. It's kind of the why we get up every morning to make a positive difference in Maryland. So unlike 2020, at least the winter of 2020, this year Mother Nature has thrown us a few curveballs, but also it has kept our operation team hustling in the pursuit of that mission. So just since February started, our team has tackled roughly 7 events, winter events, that have impacted either the entire state or a significant portion with wintry precipitation. Many of those events have been overlapping, and our staff has, as the Secretary mentioned, put in some long hours. We've seen everything from snow to sleet to freezing rain to refreeze to drifting to some high winds. And I'm just kind of really proud of our team, because we've worked through the nights, weekends, holidays, and probably the most grief I got was some of them had to work through the Super Bowl. This is being done during a pandemic that requires a lot of health practices for good health, added controls to make sure we stay and minimize our physical interaction. We've improved the use with our IT systems with data, and all performed this kind of mostly in isolation. So our team has adapted really well, overcame, and we're really thriving. So part of that responsibility is maintaining our roadway system and taking good care of our transportation infrastructure that's been entrusted to us. So although critical and vital, and it was mentioned by the legislative analysts, SHA's infrastructure is more than pavement and bridges. It's also our drainage systems, traffic signals, lighting systems, traffic barriers, and over 70 other asset types we monitor. We've seen an increase in recent years for emergency replacement or repairs of our transportation assets like drainage structures, lighting systems, and such because of just weather events or simply deterioration over time. Across our assets, we estimate over a $5 billion gap over the next 10 years between what funding is available to us versus the resources needed to keep our roadway infrastructure in a state of good repair. So without addressing that gap, we will continue to see deterioration in our infrastructure and further lose that ability to connect people to life's opportunities on our roadways. One key aspect of that is just our approach for Vision Zero efforts, and that's to eliminate fatalities on Maryland roadways. We made over 200 spot location improvements using the context guide and our Vision Zero philosophy over the last year. That was primarily done with the grassroots approach through collaboration with our communities and local officials, and very much focused on our maintenance and operational improvements. To truly get us to a Vision Zero, zero fatalities on Maryland roadways, we must proactively consider, and the Secretary mentioned it well, every roadway user, whether that's they're on foot, bicycle, or on a motor vehicle. Our current needs for safety improvements kind of outweigh our ability to and our available funding to deliver them. So to further implement a Vision Zero improvements, we must ensure we have our system preservation funding is robust enough to address existing deficiencies, and safety improvements routinely require some minor geometric improvements to improve the system, but also to clearly identify movements for all users of that roadway. So as I kind of stated last year, good infrastructure costs money, poor infrastructure costs even more. So I invite you to look at our year-end review material that's provided in the handouts we provided. It just highlights a few of our accomplishments from 2020 for State Highway. So I'm going to pause there, and I guess I'll kind of now move on to the Department of Legislative Service report and issues raised about our budget. And like the Secretary mentioned, I want to thank Steve McCullough for his thorough analysis and his partnership throughout this entire process. So regarding the governor's allowance on page 26, we concur with the operating budget recommendations. And then with regard to the PAYGO topic and the audit document issue for Deer Park on page 26 as well, we concur with those recommendations as well. So I will close with this. COVID-19 did force SHA to kind of adapt and evolve. We did so and continue to deliver essential projects and critical services to everyone. So I thank you for your patience, and I would be happy to respond to any questions you have at this time.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Let me just say I was on a call with some advocates the other day who, you know, in years past when I've spoken to them would complain about the culture at State Highway or MDOT. And this year they said it's amazing the culture shift we've seen there over the past couple of years. So I credit that to you. And I don't remember what happened to your predecessor, but that guy, you know, probably had something to do with it as well. So appreciate the recognition that contexts are different. Up in Delegate Beitzel's district, the roads are different than over in my district in Bethesda. I do have to ask you about a few issues from my district, though, as long as I have you. And it's related to, I think, a broader problem, which is we have a couple of spots where basically because of flooding, in one case, the road's eroding, and in another case, coming off a state highway, someone's yard is continuously being flooded and destroyed. And in both cases, in one case, it's just been found to not be economically feasible to do anything about it. In the other case, the money's not there yet. And this is going to be a problem that I'm sure is happening in every district, and it's going to continue to grow. And we can clean out culverts and, you know, empty drains, but at the end of the day, our infrastructure was not engineered for the type of weather we're now getting. So have you given this any thought? I mean, obviously I want the particular projects in my district dealt with, but that's not really the issue because there'll be thousands more like this. So I'd like your response.
Yeah, I personally think drainage is probably one of our largest problems across the state. And I tried to mention that in our remarks. It's just, I think our greatest need for an asset management effort is in drainage. I don't think the resources we have allocated to it right now are what's needed. Our infrastructure with regard to pipes and our drainage structures. What we can do, the best we can do right now is in the sense with our operating dollars is clean and flush out those pipes. But in many cases, those pipes have started to deteriorate, and that's part of the reason for the sediment buildup. But we need to shift and invest more in our drainage to help, because even if we don't, we're going to continue having challenges. And I've talked to a lot of the elected officials that that have had the same challenges, especially in the lower elevation areas. So I completely agree with you, but we need to kind of, the initial thing is use our operating dollars to clean out what we have existing, but we need to put capital dollars into investing in larger pipes that will be able to accommodate the weather patterns we currently are having.
Great. I see there's a number of questions from my colleagues, but I'm going to go forward a little bit longer. Exhibit 1 that Steve showed, I don't know if you got a good look at it. It was the traffic fatalities and fatality rate. Basically in the scope of the 10 years he showed, we've never hit our goal or the MFR goal. And really the goal now is supposed to be 0 because, as you mentioned, Vision 0. So I'd like sort of your general response to that. We're so far from the real goal and the MFR goal. I mean, what are your thoughts? I'm aware of the context-driven guidelines. I appreciate all that, but what else do we have to do here? What should we be doing differently?
I think it's a very much a four-pronged attack there. It's there's engineering that we could do, but that's just one small part of it. I think there's an education, enforcement, and emergency response, the 4 E's. And I think it's going to take a team effort to do that. I'm not sure we'll ever fully get to 0, but that should not be why we should continue to try to progress there. Because any fatality, anytime my phone beeps and I see we've had an incident, that's the first thing I look for is whether it was a fatality. So I take those all personally, and I really feel like we've adjusted how we're doing designs, but we need to implement those more. And back to just our system preservation needs. We have assets out there now that need to be upgraded to not just focus on one mode of transportation. They need to consider all modes of transportation, whether folks are on the foot or bike or scooter. And that's going to require an investment. In the meantime, there's an education part there, and I think the education is mainly focused on our motorists. They're the ones that kind of control a lot of this. Being an avid runner, I've had to dodge and do a few hood dives from folks not paying attention while I'm running. So I'm very much an advocate of that. The enforcement part, that's where we got it. It becomes a resource and budget issue. You can only stretch law enforcement so far. So I think we also need to look at that as well. And then more importantly, just emergency response. The quicker, ideally, we put them out of business, that they never have to respond. But when they do, we need to make sure they're timely.
Great. Let me give you a little bit more credit. Last year, we passed the Pedestrian Access Act to make sure that sidewalks remained open in our walkable communities during construction. And you guys have come out with pretty, I would say, robust guidance to make sure that sidewalks are actually staying open. I know another issue in my county that they're now focusing on is getting sidewalks cleared after snow incidents around bus stops so that people aren't walking in the street. So I would just sort of refer that to you. I know oftentimes SHA doesn't necessarily, how do I put this politely, doesn't fully focus on the sidewalks alongside their roads, though I think with this Pedestrian Access Act, you're doing a great job around the transit-oriented development. So I would just sort of put that on your radar as an issue where we're trying to find some of these key bus corridors to make sure that people can access the bus stops without walking in the street, where, especially in bad weather, they're much more prone to get hit by cars. So appreciate your attention to that. Let me turn to Vice Chair Krim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first thing I want to say is my congratulations for getting those roads clean as quickly as you did, because I drove home today and the roads are dry. I mean, they're in excellent shape. So thank you so much for getting that done, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Administrator. I appreciate that. And Secretary Slater, I do want to thank you for 85 and 180 here in Frederick County. Those are two big projects for us. It's related to economic development here. So I appreciate that. And I don't want to take up the committee's time with my things in my district. So what I would like to do, Administrator Smith, is schedule a time with you and the district engineer together so we can sit down and talk. I haven't really had that communication recently, so I would like to get that started. And if you wouldn't mind, my staff will get in touch with your office and we'll schedule that, and I will ask all my district questions. I do want to follow up though with some of the questions that the chair was talking about, the fatalities. So when there is a fatality, is there a way to record what the proximate cause was on an accident report or whatever, so that you know whether it's distracted driving, if it's speeding, if it's something related to a highway engineering issue? Do you get that information? And where is that data?
I can, the short answer to that is we have that information. There is, when it becomes, especially when there's a fatality involved, obviously there's some legal proceedings that need to follow through, and we need to allow law enforcement to follow through on their investigation. So we don't always get it immediately, but that's why we're just showing 2019 data right now. So we do have that information. It could always be better. We're actually working with Maryland State Police and the Motor Vehicle Administration to try to better harness that data and get it to a point that we can use it and leverage it to make better decisions. So we have it. It's just not always in a timely fashion or necessarily presented in a way that we can proactively go out and I'd rather proactively go out and do treatments before we have to react to a fatality. And I think that's the direction we want to head. And I think we have, if we could get the data in a format that is useful, I think that's ideally where we want to be. But we have a current partnership. We have NHTSA coming in to kind of give us analysis and a third-party view of this on how we can better work with law enforcement, as well as Motor Vehicle and Maryland Highway Safety Office, as well as State Highway Office, to be able to use that and leverage that data in the future. So I really see it being more promising in the future, but we do have that data. It's just not as quickly as we would like it right now.
Well, I want to help you get that data, and I want to help you get it timely. So whatever I can do to help you do that, whether it's maybe some budget language or something that we can do here on our end to assist you in getting that data, I'm willing to help you do that. So we'll discuss that further when we have our private meeting. There was something else that I wanted to speak with you about, Secretary Slater, and that is the Federal CARES Act money. So are you planning on bringing that through the budget process like some of your colleagues did, cabinet secretaries? I'll just let you speak to that.
Sure. So let me first kind of add one note there. You know, when we're looking at, before I address the CARES Act, really for you, Delegate Krim, as well as Chairman Corman, you know, on the safety side, we have found that we can really make the greatest impact when we look at things programmatically. And so, you know, one of the areas that I like to focus on, and I don't always have agreement with our team, is things like speed limits in urbanized areas. I think you think about speed limits in urbanized areas, you know, you get away from kind of chasing one location or another. Sure, we're going to have locations on our system that have challenges that we have to address, but you can make such a greater impact when you think about that, what that data is telling you and where things are happening, and then looking at that broadly, not only where it's happening today, but then applying those guidelines across the rest of the system to be able to kind of find those similar characteristics. And so I think I'd love to work with you. I'm willing to work with anyone in the legislature that wants to talk about highway safety and how we can save lives. So, you know, I'm happy to kind of work with you on that as well. On the Federal CARES Act, I'm certainly, that's not something that we had thought a lot about, but I'm certainly willing to have that conversation. You know, so the Federal CARES Act money that we had came in a couple of different buckets. And so, you know, the transit side, which is mainly focused on operating. And so, you know, they're basically formula dollars that we'll put directly into MTA's operating budget, exactly like Congress intended. And then there's money on the state highway side, which is really kind of backstop to state DOTs on the highway construction, or really just highway budget side. I don't know that we've gotten our full detailed information on exactly how much that's going to be yet. One of the questions that has been raised is whether we're going to apply the HUR formula to that and share some of that with our local government. So we're looking at where the federal guidelines are that are going to come with those dollars and see how we can best use them. But I'm certainly willing to have that conversation. My first priority that I would bring to the table is all of those dollars go directly into system preservation. I think that's where we've had our greatest impact. I think you heard from Administrator Smith on, drainage and pavement and those programs really were hit hard. And I think that's our bread and butter. And I'd like to do that. But I'm certainly open to any conversation in terms of working with the budget committees on that.
I think the budget committees would be very interested in your bringing forward those funds through the supplemental budget. So how do we need to continue this conversation?
Let me ask Jacqueline Hartman, our budget czar, on here on the best way to kind of approach that and kind of what we think our timing might be.
Sure. Good afternoon, Jacqueline Hartman, Chief Financial Officer for the Maryland Department of Transportation. DBM has reached out to us regarding bringing that money in through a supplemental budget. As the Secretary mentioned, the tough part right now is we really just don't have the final numbers from our federal partners. So a lot of those numbers are formula driven, and especially with the transit side, it takes a little bit longer to get to our number. So, realizing there's still a good month and a half left of session, we do expect to bring at least part of that money in for fiscal 22. And then I would expect there'll probably be a portion that we hold back for fiscal 23. So you'll see next year.
Okay, so you've already then set the process up through DBM. Is that what you're saying for a supplemental?
That is what we will do is through a supplemental budget. We just don't have the numbers, so we haven't really started the process yet.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And, Mr. Secretary, as you're aware, there was also some money in the Relief Act, particularly targeted transportation, smaller numbers than the federal stimulus, to be sure. Delegate Kittleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, you may have noticed that periodically I have some criticism of certain of your modes. I want you to know that it has been my practice to tell anyone who's interested that we have the best state highway department in the country. And I think that has been true through a number of very, very good, talented administrators. I'm sorry, as a by the by, do you have to be named Smith to run? We used to have Ricky Smith over at the MTA. We've got, no, and then anyway, seems to be working. My questions are all just sheer curiosity. And the first one is about the ICC. I just wondered if you have usage numbers and if it's living up to its billing. I mean, I always liked it, but I want to make sure that it was a.
Delegate Kittleman, that's a Maryland Transportation Authority roadway. So
it is.
We'd be happy to follow up with them on.
Yeah, thank you. Then I want to thank you very much for Route 32, which is being expanded right past my section, and I drive down it every day and I watch everybody working on it, and other people are mad because it's construction. I am tickled pink because it's being built, and they're going very fast. Do you know if there's a expected finish date anytime?
I'd have to follow back up with you on that. I don't have that off the top of my head.
That's okay. I thought if you did, that would be fine. Otherwise, it'll be finished when it's finished. And finally, I do have this solution to our problem on safety on the roads, trying to get down to zero. And it goes along with the next question. Well, all we need is to have everyone in an automatically driven car. The numbers are something like it would cut accidents down 94%. My question is, have you all given any thought to that upcoming process? I don't know when it's going to get here, but it's going to be interesting for SHA to consider.
Absolutely. So we do have a connected autonomous vehicle lead person. It's Carol DeLeon, and we're in coordination with the Secretary's office has their own connected autonomous vehicle initiatives along with MDTA. So I think Maryland is actually well positioned for that, and we have partnerships with some of the manufacturers as well as the intelligent transportation system devices. I think it provides a lot of great opportunities for efficiency and, like you mentioned, for safety. It's just a matter of the devil's always in the details and making sure we can get technology to talk to one another, and more importantly, also have that technology speak to our vehicles.
And make sure that people are, I'm looking forward to it, but I know there are a number of people who are a bit nervous about having the car drive itself. So, thank you very much.
Delegate, we do have a connected and autonomous vehicle strategic plan that I'd be happy to share with the committee if everyone is interested. And then the one point I'll make on connected and autonomous vehicles that sometimes gets left out is the freedoms that that technology will offer to our disabled community, and their ability to travel and be mobile is just endless.
And also to transit, because if you can have a car drive itself to the ends, that sort of takes away most of the problems. Thank you.
So let me follow up, Delegate. I got a little text. So summer of 2022 is the expected completion date for Maryland 32.
Good.
And back to your earlier question, we have 2,552 bridges in Maryland that State Highways are responsible for.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Kittleman. We used to have a Secretary Jim Smith in the department as well, a couple before Secretary.
Oh, of course, I forgot. It was a
Smith
Thank
Caucus. Senator Edwards, Chair McCray gave me permission to call upon you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, sometimes we don't get all the paperwork through the computer, and I don't have Steve's report, so I don't know if Steve, you might have to answer this, or the administrator, reference to Deer Park. I think you had a blurb on there that said it was $20-some thousand. I didn't jot the numbers down that they own, and someone was going to send them a letter telling them withholding the money. Who's sending the letter, and when is the letter going out?
So the DLS recommendation is to attach budget language, as has been done in the past, to withhold those funds until all the delinquent reports are submitted. So they would get that notification for the 20th. Now, this is the money that's not available till July 1, and it's available from July 1 through June 30th next year. So they would have a year, to comply, or they would lose that funding.
But again, who sends a notification to them?
The Office of Legislative Audits works with all of the local agencies in terms of their audits submissions. So several times a year.
Okay, I did talk to the mayor not too long ago, and I know they had some they did send in. They have a hard time. It's a very small town, as you know, those of you know Deer Park, it's a very small town. They have a hard time getting town clerks and keeping them once they get them. So they got to, every time they get a change, they got to go back through these numbers. That's one of the big reasons, although I could try to lighten this up a little bit and say with the mail system these days, they might have mailed them back 3 years ago and they just haven't got here yet. But anyway, and it is the original place where Deer Park water comes from, by the way, for those of you who don't know, if you drink Deer Park water. Anyway, thank you. I wanted to know that because he knows it's important to get these audits in. I think the state maybe needs to kind of reinforce it a little bit more, maybe ask them what the big concern is of why they aren't getting them in, instead of just saying you got to get them in, you're not getting them in. Okay, well, maybe we can help you out here a little bit. So I just throw that out there for conversation. A couple quick things. Mr. Secretary, I've said this ever since I've known you, and ever since I've been in elected office, talk about snow. You forgot something today.
150 inches.
There you go.
County.
Is
that right, Tim?
150 inches.
I guess you want to know the official totals? I think grab them. So
yeah, what is it for today? We'll get it for the end of session.
Well, I'll give you Kaiser's Ridge. Does that work for you?
That's the official place. Yes.
All right. So we've had 107 inches of snow before this latest event, and over 3 inches of ice. So we convert ice. One inch of ice converts to 10 inches of snow. So we're roughly 140 inches of total snow at Kaiser's Ridge prior to this last event, and they had roughly 10 inches over the last 2 days.
And I'm sure the roads are clear. If I can get to Garrett County, I'm okay. So from here to Garrett County, we're in good shape. We have the greatest snow crews in the world. I'll put them up against anybody, both state and local, for taking care of the snow on the roads and the situations on the roads. I just want to pass that along. Two quick other things. Before the pandemic hit, we had a big meeting in Cumberland. As you know, we've had a lot of accidents on Savage Mountain coming down into Cumberland, basically in the same place for some reason. And a lot of things were discussed as to how we might be able to make it more safe, for a better way to say it. And a lot of things were thrown out there, and I've not heard anything basically since that meeting. I was told the department was going to look at certain things that were brought up there and maybe some other things. You don't need to answer it here, but if you could get me something saying, yeah, here's kind of what we're looking at that we think will make it a safer approach. Because there was one a couple of weeks ago there, basically in the same place, another tractor trailer. We've been fortunate at this point that no one's been killed. Well, I think maybe one instance of someone was, but mainly it's tractor trailers that are the ones involved. And then just real quick, Mr. Secretary, we talked a while back on the 219 North issue. Pennsylvania's put $6 million in. We talked a couple of weeks ago and you said we need to get this in the CTP. I don't have Steve's thing. He got down to Baltimore and he didn't go past that. Is that in the CTP?
So it was not in the final, but it's in the draft. It's ADHS funding. So it's the federal funding that you can only use there. And so we were able to authorize that and kind of match PennDOT so that we can work together on the preliminary planning of that connection.
Good, because I think what I'm hearing from the federal government, the potential is there that maybe a fair amount more money is going to come into the ARC road system and other things that maybe the two states can tap together to get this road completed, which would be a tremendous asset to our part of the state and the state of Maryland as a whole. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Edwards. If there's anything left for Western Maryland, Delegate Beitzel.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to follow up on what Senator Edwards has said there, I just want to second what he said about the 219 North. I said both of us would like to see that project complete before we pass on into the happy hunting grounds. And so it's been going a long time. And we want to thank you, Secretary Slater, for what you're doing to move it forward. There's one thing I would like to mention that I think could be back to Administrator Smith is, and I've mentioned this several times out in the county to the district engineer and other folks when they do the consolidated transportation plan dog and pony show, as we refer to it up there in Garrett County. 219 bridge. I've been over that a few times, and when it was built, there was a real big complaint about the noise when the trucks went across that bridge. That's the rumbling of the tires of the people that lived on both sides, and they put some kind of a coating on that bridge, and that coating was put on probably late. And George would probably remember the late 60s, early 70s when they built the bridge, and then they put that coating on there. And that coating is still there. And I don't think I've ever seen a pothole in that bridge, but the coating's almost gone and it's wearing down. And I think the noise is increasing. And we've asked them to look at that and recoat that bridge. Whatever they used, it's really worked well. And I think something, when I'm traveling back and forth, and I'm traveling further than any other legislator here, that we see bridges are being worked on and jackhammering up concrete and stuff. It's something I think you should consider looking at. To coat the bridges may save you a lot of maintenance going forwards.
Delegate, that's one that Senator Edwards does raise every year as well, that whatever we used on that bridge worked well.
Yeah. And thank you for what you do. Keep our roads clear up there in Western Maryland.
Delegate, I'll tell you that every year when I was in the planning director seat, I got a call from Senator Montgomery down in Brookville, and she would remind me that she was a year older and she had not seen us start construction on the Brookville bypass, and that was how she advocated for that project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you, Delegate Beitzel. I don't have Vice Chair Krim's reservations about raising parochial issues, so I do have one more for you, Mr. Administrator. Maryland 187, which is Old Georgetown Road. First of all, huge thanks to you and the district team and the secretary, because some really quick moving improvements were put in there after a young man was killed on his bicycle in traffic, and you all came in and on the back of a resurfacing contract, were able to create some separated bike lanes. So thank you for that. Further north from there at 187 and Executive, unfortunately last year there was a fatality of a construction worker on some work that's being done there. And now the state and the county DOT are going to close that intersection for the remainder of that work, which I think absolutely has to happen. There have been a number of close calls, and as I mentioned, a fatality. There is a building there, a medical building, that is looking for a little workaround so that they can continue to get people in and out during that closure. So I'm going to send an email about that later today, Mr. Administrator, to the district team and to the county DOT, but I'm probably going to copy you on it. I just wanted to make you aware of it. Again, I think that closing the intersection for the construction, absolutely appropriate. We do not want anyone else to be even in a close call, let alone another fatality, but there's also a medical building there. We just want to make sure that they can serve their patients.
Understood.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Administrator. And it looks like there's another question from Vice Chair Chang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The question is to the Secretary Administrator. Over in Howard County on Route 40, there's a Korean Wave project that's being in the process. I was wondering, would the agency have any updates on that project? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. So that is really being driven by the Korean Business Association up and down that corridor. We've been working with them as they were bringing the proposal in. And we've been reviewing a number of the features that they've kind of brought forward to ensure that they are safe and kind of breakaway and around the right of way and those types of things. And then continuing to engage with the county council on that as well, just to keep everybody updated. But we can certainly, our district engineer, Terry Seuss, has been kind of leading those efforts for us, and we can follow up and get you a detailed report on exactly where we are with everything.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Chang, I don't see any other questions. I think Delegate Beitzel's hand's up from before. Did I miss anybody? Chair McCray, anything to close us out on?
I guess just to close out, and I'll be very quick, just thank you, Secretary Slater, for your leadership, and thank you, Steve McCullough, for your leadership in reference to the analysts. And I just say that on behalf of this senators, Doug Peters, Senator Edwards, and Senator Sale and myself. Thank you.
And Administrator Smith as well, and Budget Czar Jacqueline Hartman. So thank you all very much. I believe that is it for today, and everybody have a good, safe weekend.
Take care.